A La Nina is developing over the next 3 months. If you can take a look at the overall trend from the Climate Prediction Center that just updated yesterday, you definitely see that La Nina starting to build. We come off that Enzo neutral that we took advantage of in the summer months. But now we flip the calendar into September, a noticeable La Nina is building, and that only starts to amplify as we get into the month of October and going into November and even parts of December. So it does appear the next 3 months for October, November, and the first part of winter, we are going to be in a weak La Nina. But it does appear in the second half of winter that we transition back to an Enzo neutral for your January and February. So if we take a look at the setup and why this is, here are the overall sea surface temperatures, and man, this is completely, contrast, right? We've got all this deep blue that is complements of this La Nina that is building out there into the equatorial Pacific. You can see the drop in the cooler waters really since the month of July. The trend has been pretty noticeable through July, through August, and it's continuing now. So for now, 3 consecutive months now qualifies for a weak La Nina, and I think we'll definitely be there for the next at least 3 months. But the noticeable warm blob to the north of there, this is your North Pacific Oscillation, this will help amplify the pattern that we're currently in. So now that we're trending into this weak La Nina, this warm blob over the North Pacific will be helping to actually enhance that La Nina, at least for the next 3 months. It will actually help enhance the Enzo neutral that will go into the second half of winter. So if we look at the typical La Nina and kind of what that looks like, all that really means as far as into layman's terms is your subtropical jet stream, the jet stream further to the south, really just becomes much into the halt. It becomes a lot less active. And whenever you see the lot less active subtropical, because you got cooler water, storms thrive off very warm water. So if it's got to go over those cooler waters, obviously you're likely going to get less storms. Less storms means less rain. And then you've got the polar jet stream starting to become taken over, right? They get more of the systems, so that creates the flow coming off the northwest flow, pushing back into the Pacific Northwest and feeding into those areas across the northern plains, while it's yet the southern jet of the jet stream will likely trend towards that drier side, and some of these the drought will start to deepen as we get further into the month, into fall. So, but we are still in hurricane season, and it's been very active across into the Pacific. Yet we have another named storm. This is Tropical Storm Mario. It formed just today, and that also continues that west northwest trajectory. And what we've seen as of late, yes, that is going to get pulled up into that jet stream and spread that moisture back into areas of the desert Southwest, back into Southern California, that will likely feed into the Rockies, getting into the central and northern plains as well. Complements of this more active Pacific, hurricane season, and we're going to be seeing more of these storms that come off and kind of take that more west northwest trajectory and get pulled up in that jet stream, up in the upper level winds. And the trend for the next 7 days, you definitely see this as to start to see the greens start to put that precipitation back into the Texas Panhandle, areas of New Mexico, back into Arizona, through the Four Corners region, and feed it into the central part of the U.S., across the Rockies, into the northern plains, as we see hints coming back that the rains will eventually start to come back with a vengeance for the Pacific Northwest, and they're going to be coming back at least subtle for the rest of September, while you'll see much of the southern flank of the country into the southeast definitely starts drying out big time, and that feeds into the Ohio Valley and even portions of the Mid-Atlantic, as well as in the Northeast, will be on the overall drier side. So where it's going to be raining for the next 7 days will be actually somewhat below average conditions, which we typically see this time of year, while the drier areas will be warming up. So expect a lot of sunshine across the central and eastern portions of the U.S., while they're still dealing with those daily rain showers down there across areas of Florida. And here's the updated drought index. This is before we actually kick in that La Nina for the next 3 months. So there are definitely drought conditions already across the desert Southwest. That's going to be helped out a little bit by the active Pacific jet that will be coming in with these hurricanes that come in off the Pacific, will feeding into this area at least for the next couple of weeks. But once we get into that second half of October, I do feel that will be dying down as well. And that drier spell will start to kick back in, where we are in a drought up here across the Pacific Northwest. That will likely start to eat away the deeper we get into fall, especially with the rains coming back starting in October. Really starts to amplify in the month of November and December. So I think once we hit January, this drought up here in the Pacific Northwest will likely be a distant memory. But it's the middle part of the country, like portions of Texas and Oklahoma, much of the Southeast. I think these areas will start to deepen in the drought as the deeper we get into the fall months. And the trend is overall warmer. Of course, this is the time of year where the overall average temperature starts to decrease, but we're still getting warmer conditions, and so that makes it more or less warmer the average for almost the entire lower 48 for not just in the week ahead, but going into even next week as well, in that 8 to 14 day period heading into the first official day of fall. And yes, with the more active Pacific hurricane season with Mario and the storms that were coming off behind that, that is going to help feed the moisture back into the desert Southwest, feed it into the Rockies, and feed that into the northern, central, and northern plains as well. While we see the southern branch of the jet stream definitely start coming to a halt. So they will be begging for rain, and I do feel you're going to be coming in with some drought conditions starting to really amplify down there into the southeast. And that's what the Climate Prediction Center is actually expecting, with a rapid onset drought risk starting to occur as we get into that second half of the month of September, with little to no rain building back into Mississippi, Alabama, and getting into Georgia. I like this. This will likely expand in the next month or two, but we are in hurricane season. We've had 6 named storms on the Atlantic side, so do feel we're going to have more active tropical waves that come off the African coast. They will be going over the main development region. And then further south, as we head across into the Pacific side, there is the below average rainfall into the equatorial Pacific. That is those cooler waters, right, down there in that region. But it's not till we get off the coast in Central America where we start to see more active storms, not just this week, but going into next week to end the month of September as well. We're definitely going to be seeing more and more storms form off this region, and that will likely continue at least in the first half of October. But what also is going to be continuing heading into October is the overall warmer conditions. So I do feel the Pacific will be starting to, again, that same pattern will not be changing. So I do feel we'll be getting more storms, more monsoonal flow form into the desert Southwest, feeding into the areas of the Rockies, while much of the central and eastern 2/3 of the U.S. will likely be above average temperatures heading into the month of October. And this overall pattern, at least for the next couple of weeks, it doesn't scream like crazy severe weather, right? We'll get some severe weather across the plains and portions of the Texas Panhandle, but we're not really seeing any big time super setups for the rest of this week into next week and going into that last week of September at least on the severe weather front. And as we flip the calendar going into October, Yes, I do feel the rains will transition and start taking on more of that La Nina type look for the Pacific Northwest, back into Oregon, Washington, and Northern California as they start to erode and start to eat away, pick at that drought that you've been locked in over the last couple of months. And we'll start to see that overall trend across the middle part of the country and the eastern 2/3 part of the country start to become a lot less active and overall drier. Of course, October is one of your wettest months of the season, so you'll still get rain, right? But overall, it'll be trending on the below average side, and it's definitely going to be warm. It definitely appears that it's going to be overall warm. It's not, crazy hot or anything like stretch of the imagination, but a good part of the country does look to be above average in the month of October and even in going into the month of November. I do feel this La Nina trend and that blob in the North Pacific is going to help amplify that weak La Nina. And that will help the trend being overall warmer conditions than what you would typically see for November standards. And yes, even the Climate Prediction Center is definitely on board for the rest of September, October, going into November. They have the same thing. Overall, above average conditions for a good part of the lower 48. And that trend to that La Nina type look starts to take effect as well. This will start to amplify going into October and November with the rains coming back for the Pacific Northwest. And once we put the brakes on that more active pattern across the Pacific with these hurricane seasons, as hurricane season starts to start to die down as we get into that second half of October, at least on the Pacific side, I do feel this area will start to become a lot less active and start drier and definitely start taking on more of that La Nina look as we transition into that October, November, and December timeframe. So guys, I appreciate you watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch the next update while I protect you before and after the storm.